Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something really unique, the blend of math and literature.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we found this academic paper talking about a Taiwanese creative writing competition.
Okay.
So they challenged students to combine these two seemingly opposite worlds. Math, the language of logic and precision, used to create poems and stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to think of math as kind of rigid, right? And
Right.
literature is about, emotion and creativity. But
Yeah.
this competition, the one we're looking at for this deep dive, it really explores math as a language, a way to express complex ideas. And, even deep human emotions in a way we don't usually think about.
Exactly. And our source material starts off with this concept called the Deborah number.
Yeah.
And it was inspired by, get this, the biblical song of Deborah.
Wow. That's a surprising connection. Marcus Reiner, he was a scientist researching how materials flow, and he was really inspired by this ancient song. He was kind of grappling with this idea that everything flows, which scientifically isn't always true, right?
Right.
Some materials, like mountains, they seem incredibly solid.
Yeah.
But they actually flow very, very slowly over time.
Mountains flowing. I need you to break this down for me.
Okay, so in the Song of Deborah, there's a line about mountains flowing before the Lord.
Okay.
And Rayner, he saw this as like a poetic way to describe something that seems impossible but is actually happening just on a time scale we can't really perceive.
Okay.
And this led him to develop the Deborah number, which helps us understand how the flow of a material relates to like the time we observe it. So a high Deborah number means a material appears solid to us because its flow is just way too slow for us to notice.
So an ancient poem helped a scientist make a groundbreaking discovery.
Yeah.
That's incredible. It really makes you wonder how many other scientific concepts are out there just waiting for someone to make that connection.
Yeah, it really speaks to the power of metaphor, right?
Yeah.
The idea that something as concrete as a mountain can be used to represent the flow of time or the way materials behave. Metaphors can bridge that gap between abstract concepts and our human understanding.
It's like using a familiar image to unlock a door to a whole new world of knowledge.
Exactly.
Speaking of unlocking worlds, let's move on to our next example. It's a poem called Parabola by Yu-Tung Cheng, and it uses this mathematical shape to explore, get this, the journey of a relationship.
A powerful example of how you can weave a mathematical concept into a narrative to express complex emotions.
Yeah, the poem starts with, last year, time stood at the vertex. I was on the focus, you were on the directrix. Close together, we were full of expectations raised by an equal distance. We looked forward to becoming each other's life apex. What stands out to you in these opening lines?
Immediately, Cheng establishes the parabola as this framework for the relationship. The focus and directrix, always the same distance apart, symbolize those two individuals on their separate paths. And the vertex, the point where they are closest, represents a moment of, intense connection, shared hopes for the future.
And the poem takes this really poignant turn. However, the reality is that on that day, we separated. From the highest point, you and I started falling in different directions. So the parabola's curve, it becomes this visual representation of their diverging paths. So the poem is mapping out the emotional landscape of their journey.
Exactly. And as the poem continues, that parabola shape continues to inform the narrative. From the lowest vertex, you and I are still moving in different directions. It is the lowest peak of imperfection, yet we both matured. Drawing a perfect arc, we extend to infinity at both ends and no longer intersect. The parabola's infinite extension really emphasizes how their individual journeys are ongoing even as they move further apart.
It's almost like the poem is saying, even though their paths diverged the experience they shared, that connection represented by the parabola, it continues to shape who they are. Have you ever felt like your life or a relationship has followed an unexpected trajectory, like a parabola, with its highs and lows, its moments of closeness and distance?
I think that feeling of life's unexpected twists and turns, it's something we can all relate to. And what's so powerful about this poem is that it uses a mathematical concept to give shape and meaning to that universal experience.
Right. All right, ready for another example from this competition. This one is a flash fiction piece called Love Letters of a Science Student, where math becomes the language of love.
This is where we really see the creativity flourish. The piece plays with this idea that even something as seemingly cold and abstract as math can be used to express those deep, heartfelt emotions.
Yeah, the story starts with this boy who's head over heels for a girl who loves science. And instead of like typical love letters, he incorporates math into his declarations.
Oh, interesting.
He compares his life before meeting her to the empty set, saying he was nothing without her. Then he worries that their distance will be like the two foci of an ellipse always apart.
Uh-huh. But then he makes this beautiful declaration, right? He says that if their love has to be an ellipse, they'll defy the rules and become a circle and ellipse with overlapping foci symbolizing their complete unity.
It's so clever. He's taking these mathematical concepts and turning them into romantic metaphors. Then the girl throws him a curveball with her confession.
Ah, yes, the confession. It's a series of math and science questions that on the surface seem totally random.
Yeah.
But it's in the answers that her true message is revealed.
This part really blew me away. She asks things like, what's the 4n plus 1 power of I, and what's the work done by friction divided by force? Talk about a brainy way to confess your feelings.
It's such a brilliant example of how you can use creative writing to incorporate technical elements in a way that challenges the reader. To decode the message, you have to engage with the math and science, understanding not just the answers, but their underlying connections.
And the payoff is incredible. When you string together the answers to her questions, it spells out I-L-O-V-E-U, I love you, delivered through a series of equations. I don't know if I should be swooning or reaching for my calculator.
It's a delightful blend of intellect and emotion. It challenges our preconceived notions of what a love letter can be and reminds us that romance can be expressed in countless ways.
So we've seen how the Song of Deborah inspired a scientific concept, a parabola became the framework for a relationship's journey, and a love confession was hidden within mathematical equations. I'm starting to think there's no limit to what you can do when you blend math and literature.
I think we've only just begun to scratch the surface.
What other surprises await us in this deep dive?
Yeah, let's continue exploring these fascinating connections and see what other insights we can uncover.
That last story, it really got me thinking. It's like she used math and science as this secret code to express her feelings. Makes you wonder if there are other ways we could use these codes to communicate and understand the world you know.
That's a fascinating thought, and it actually ties in nicely with another point. Our source material makes the idea that exploring mathematical literature can help people learn, especially those who might not naturally gravitate towards math.
Okay, I can already hear some people saying, wait, what? Math and literature? How can those possibly help me learn? But this paper actually makes a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah, think about it. We often encounter math in this very abstract, formulaic way, right? But when we see those same concepts embedded in stories or poems, it brings them to life. Suddenly, they have context, meaning, and even an emotional resonance.
So it's like sneaking in a lesson without it feeling like a lesson.
Precisely. Our source material mentions these researchers Sarah Glaz and Su Liang, who used like classical mathematical poetry to create engaging word problems for their students. They drew inspiration from Lilavati, a book of mathematical problems written by this 12th century Indian mathematician named Bhaskara.
Hold on, math problems in poetry form. That's so cool. Were these poems like secret codes too?
Well, not exactly secret codes, but definitely a more engaging way to present mathematical challenges. These poems, they presented problems within narratives, making them relatable and less intimidating for learners. Imagine, encountering a math problem that unfolds like a story with characters and a plot.
Right.
It's a completely different experience than just staring at an equation on a page.
Yeah, I wish my math classes had been that interesting. I might have actually paid more attention. But even beyond making math more engaging, this paper argues that exploring mathematical literature can help develop essential skills for any field, even those not directly related to math.
Absolutely. We're talking about skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and the ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. These are skills that benefit anyone regardless of their profession.
So whether you're a future engineer or a chef or an artist, dipping your toes into the world of mathematical literature could actually give you a leg up.
Think of it this way. The more diverse our knowledge base, the more tools we have in our mental toolbox. And the ability to connect ideas from different disciplines is like having a superpower.
Right.
It allows us to approach challenges from unique angles and come up with creative solutions.
I love that analogy. It's like that famous quote by Steve Jobs, creativity is just connecting things. The more we expose ourselves to different ways of thinking, the more dots we have to connect. It reminds me of that flash fiction piece we discussed earlier, Love Letters of a Science Student. That girl's confession, it wasn't just a clever trick. It required the boy to think critically and apply his knowledge to decode the message.
Exactly. It wasn't about rote memorization. It was about understanding the concepts deeply enough to see the hidden patterns and connections. And that kind of thinking is valuable in any field.
We've been talking a lot about the benefits of exploring this intersection of math and literature, but I'm curious, from your perspective, what makes these examples so powerful? What do they reveal about the nature of knowledge itself?
That's a great question. I think what strikes me most is how these examples challenge our preconceived notions about the boundaries between disciplines. We tend to categorize knowledge into these neat little boxes, math over here, literature over there, but these stories and poems show us that those boundaries are often artificial.
So instead of separate boxes, it's more like a Venn diagram where those circles overlap, creating a space for something new and unexpected to emerge.
Precisely. And it's in that overlapping space, that intersection of different ways of knowing, that we often find the most profound insights. When we break down those artificial barriers, we open ourselves up to a richer, more nuanced understanding of the world.
It's making me realize that maybe the way we traditionally learn, with those strict subject divisions, isn't always the most effective. Maybe we need more opportunities to explore those in-between spaces where disciplines collide.
I completely agree. There's a certain magic that happens when we allow ourselves to blur the lines, to see math through the lens of poetry, or find scientific inspiration in ancient songs. It's a reminder that knowledge isn't linear or compartmentalized. It's a web of interconnected ideas waiting to be explored.
This deep dive has definitely been an eye-opener for me. I'm starting to see mathematical concepts everywhere. It's like I've unlocked a secret code to understanding the world in a whole new way.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Once you start seeing these connections, you can't unsee them. It's like the world becomes this giant puzzle, and you have this newfound appreciation for the intricate patterns and relationships that make up the bigger picture.
I'm eager to see what other pieces of this puzzle we uncover as we continue our exploration. There's still so much more to discover in this fascinating world where math and literature collide. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring this fascinating intersection of math and literature. From ancient songs inspiring scientific breakthroughs to love confessions hidden within equations, it seems like these two worlds, often seen as opposites, have a lot more in common than we might think.
What's been most striking to me is how these examples highlight the power of creative thinking. We've seen how mathematical concepts can enhance storytelling, and how literary devices can illuminate complex scientific ideas. It really underscores the idea that innovation often happens when we bridge the gap between seemingly disparate fields.
It's like breaking down those mental silos we often create, right? Instead of thinking, this is math and that's literature, we start to see the connections, the underlying patterns that weave everything together.
Exactly. And as we've been discussing, embracing this interconnectedness not only enriches our understanding, but also equips us with valuable skills for navigating a complex world.
Speaking of navigating the world, there's one more point in our source material that I found really intriguing. The author suggests that exploring mathematical literature could be particularly beneficial for students pursuing vocational careers.
That's an interesting point. We often associate vocational education with hands-on skills and practical knowledge. But the truth is, creativity and problem solving are essential in any field, and exploring the intersection of math and literature can be a powerful way to cultivate those skills.
I can already hear some folks saying, hold on a minute, why would a future chef or mechanic need to analyze poetry about parabolas? But the paper argues that this kind of cross-disciplinary thinking helps develop a more flexible and adaptable mindset.
It's about recognizing patterns, connecting ideas, and thinking outside the box, skills that can be applied to any profession. Imagine a chef who understands the mathematical principles behind ratios and proportions. They might be able to experiment with new recipes and flavor combinations in a more innovative way. Or think about a mechanic who can visualize geometric shapes and apply spatial reasoning to solve a complex engine problem.
It's like having a secret weapon, a way of approaching challenges from a different angle. It's not just about the specific knowledge you gain, it's about the way you learn to think.
Precisely. And what's exciting is that this kind of learning can be incredibly engaging. We've seen how mathematical concepts can come alive when they're presented through stories, poems, and even love letters. It's about tapping into the power of narrative to make learning more meaningful and memorable.
And who knows, maybe by exploring these unexpected connections, we'll inspire a whole new generation of thinkers and creators who see the world through a different lens, a lens that recognizes the beauty and power of math in all its forms.
That's a wonderful thought. It's a reminder that learning is a lifelong journey, And that there are always new connections to discover, new perspectives to embrace.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of awe and wonder at the intricate tapestry of knowledge that surrounds us. It's clear that the boundaries between disciplines are more fluid than we often realize, and that there's magic to be found in those spaces where art and science, logic, and creativity collide.
And perhaps the most important takeaway is this: curiosity is key. The more we open ourselves up to the unexpected, the more likely we are to stumble upon those aha moments that spark new understanding and ignite our imaginations.
So, dear listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds open to the endless possibilities that emerge when we dare to blur the lines and dive deep into the interconnected world of knowledge. Who knows what amazing discoveries await you?